Good morning, everybody. Super excited to get started. We've got a bunch of folks who are logged in, and our guest for today, Michael. Let's get started. A brief introduction of our guest, Michael from Intuit. Definitely feels like an understatement, Michael, to call you the content strategist evangelist at Intuit. You've done such an incredible job really waving the flag across the organization. And I know there are lots of folks who have joined us today to learn how you've done it and how they can do it too. So welcome this morning. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Thank you so much, May. I'm so excited to be here. I'm also really thrilled that you're letting everyone see my superpower in that image. I think it's the superpower of a lot of people attending right now.
Awesome. Can't wait. So just before we dive into the content of today, some quick housekeeping for folks on the phone. We will be an hour this morning, and folks will be muted, but we will have lots of time for QA at the end. We're going to try to do a 15 to 20-minute QA if we can. There'll be a couple of polls throughout the session today, so we can get a sense of the responsibilities and challenges of folks on the phone. That will definitely illuminate the Q&A session too. Once we are at Q&A, there's a nifty little box that comes up. It's a pretty easy to use UI, but hopefully everyone will see the Q&A box. We're going to try to get through as many questions as possible. If you're tweeting today, we hope you are. Please mention Michael and ourselves. We are at Cordova and at Haggerty-Villa. And we will send out the webinar recording that will include the Q&A to folks who signed up who weren't able to join us, as well as, of course, everyone on the line today. Wonderful. So without any further intro, Michael, so excited to have you dive in with us today.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me talk to the world about something I'm absurdly passionate about, which is content and design systems. I've been working on them on and off for about 10 years. So I do have a pretty strong perspective. I think some of the folks out there know me or my work, have contacted me through social media, but I'd like to get to know more of the people who are listening in right now or watching. So I was wondering if you could answer that quick poll we have available. Basically, I want to know if you're working on a design system right now, and how happy are you with it? How good is the content in it? And be brutally honest, no one's being graded on this, and we're looking for real insight onto what some of your challenges might be. I'll give you a moment to click 2 buttons.
And this is going to be super insightful too, because everyone on the line just about is a content strategist, Michael. So I think these answers will be pretty illuminating.
That's fantastic. That's good to know. Thanks, May.
We'll give folks just 10 more seconds. Just about everyone has voted. Okay, cool. So we are, let's end the poll there. So amazing, says a lot about the folks on the phone. 90% are working on a design system now. Woo-hoo! Yeah, exactly, so exciting. 61% think that they do need work, that they're not quite satisfied. And what's really interesting is 34% are, no, they're not there at all. So, you know, the vast majority are wanting to work on them, and we've got low single digits of folks who are satisfied with the content guidelines in the design system. So, fertile ground for your talk, Michael.
Great, and sometime those 2 people who said yes, you need to become my best friend on Twitter or social media, and let's chat about your satisfaction, because that's just not something that we're generally seeing in most design systems. In fact, we're seeing that in a lot of systems, content is deficient or absent. So let me see if I can actually start to click through.
Perfect, you've got control now.
Great. And let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is content strategy and content design. And yes, we need both in design systems. And we're going to talk about what these design system things are. There's a lot of people who are doing them already, so I can flip through that real quickly. And we're also going to talk about, you know, the bloody drama, the mystery of where content is, what the current status of content is in design systems. And it's not great, but it's improving. There's hope for the patient. And then what content should be doing in design systems, what we really can be bringing to the table. It looks like some of you already are, and you're all my heroes for doing that. And let's move forward and talk about, one second. Trying to move forward. There we go. What a design system is. Just want to make sure this is working. There's a little bit of a lag on my system right now. But this is Nathan Curtis, who wrote in a blog post called Defining Design Systems, very helpful for our definition, actually wrote what a design system is. And his first sentence is revealing: a design system offers a library of visual style and components documented and released as reusable code for developers or tools for designers. So who he's serving, who he believes his design system is serving, is developers and designers. Fortunately, we have content designers now, so hopefully that's helping bridge some of this gap. But content strategy is not really here. And here's this bonus sentence: a system may also offer guidance on accessibility. Actually, that is not an option. That should be built into every design system at this point. Page layout and editorial, that's a lot of the content guidelines that we need. And less often branding, data visualization, UX patterns, and other tools. So already this core definition of a design system is problematic for content. But as we all know, design systems rule the world. I believe many of us have seen material design, which sort of on the left, which rules Android experiences, and of course iOS, Apple experiences are ruled by the human interface guidelines. And both Google and Apple have done a pretty good job of having content guidelines in their ecosystems. Also, obviously, still my favorite design system is the Shopify site, because they have more than one content person working on it. And actually right there, they show what matters to them. It's a beautiful site. It's beautifully illustrated. It's well organized. The information architecture is smart, and content is right there at the top in the navigations. You can quickly get to content guidelines because content is important in these experiences. Another famous pattern, famous example is the MailChimp pattern library, which of course is supported by the world famous MailChimp content style guide. If you haven't seen this, you actually should just have a look. It's because you can actually borrow all of the guidelines that are there, use them for whatever you're working on. Here's another surprising little example. This is from a company called OPower, and this is their O pattern library. And right on their homepage, they identify the audiences that they're serving with their design system. And they say that this is for designers, engineers, and clearly and significantly for our discussion, writers. Also, Huddle is a company that does, it's a way of, it's a platform for managing and looking at your video of sports events to judge your team's performance. And hence the name Uniform, to keep their experience uniform. Get it? It's clever. But it's also an excellent design system site. Light, smart content design guidance is sprinkled throughout their experience. Well done. Intuit, Dropbox, and a handful of other people are also making really good progress on integrating content and design, and Adobe as well has been making some strides lately. So those are also some examples you might want to look at if you need inspiration. But these are all like showing that, hey, these are some good sites, content's there, we're doing great. but are we? Brad Frost, who writes frequently about content, design systems, he writes infrequently about content. He notes that the cornerstone of good design systems are style guides. And of course, the amber highlight word there is mine, because style guides are part and parcel of content work and have been for literally hundreds of years since the first English language dictionary was produced. But also we've relied on Chicago or AP as our style guides for quite a long time. This is our core competency, right? So we should definitely be in these systems. We're not, in more cases than one. In a recent survey, I surveyed 240 design systems on www.styleguides.io. And how many of them actually included content as a thing at all? Less than 30%. I need to redo this because there's a lot more sites that have come on board since I did this, but I don't believe that we've moved that number significantly. Even more damning is the fact that of the 240 sites that I surveyed, only about 20% listed voice and tone as a thing at all, which is very concerning because voice and tone is actually expressed not just through the words, but through the entire experience, the typography, the colors, the interaction. So we're missing a key part of what actually is making these experiences by not having them in the design systems. So why is this content missing? Well, I think my study is a little bit flawed because styleguides.io only shows publicly available sites. I know that content is integrated into Facebook sites, but those 4 design systems are not publicly available right now. A lot of the sites there are developer vanity sites. Vanity is a little bit cruel. They're showcase sites for developers to show how cool they are at using CSS to develop certain components. A lot of the sites, and this is something to praise, are early versions of design systems where maybe just one engineer and one designer putting something out, and they want to get feedback on it, and that's great. So I can't knock those people for not having content, but they should grow into having it at some point. There are some brand sites. Brand sites are notorious for leaving content guidelines out. They're focusing on colors and visual and typography and how the photography talks about their brand, but often how they use language to convey their brand is often left out of those brand sites. The last one is the most damning, I think. A lot of the design systems that lack content are showing basically our organizational silos. Those content guidelines are hidden away somewhere on a PDF. We don't really need content to be involved in this, right? Well, let's investigate that further. It's a fundamental problem with design systems. And I go back to Nathan Curtis in another Medium article. He talks about staffing a design systems team and who should be there. These small teams, as I mentioned in the previous slide, are often just 1 or 2 people, but always a front-end developer. And that is actually key. And I do agree with Nathan Curtis on that, because you can do all the design, but unless you can build it, it matters not. It doesn't lead to anything. The Medium team, all of a sudden there's that visual person and he throws in more front-end developers. You're building more stuff, all coming out of that lead, which may be a PM, maybe an interaction designer. But then as the large team gets bigger, there's this strange thing going on here, which is a little bit disturbing for me. We're not like mentioned until the very end, and we're like in gray, you know, the kind of gray you use as a disabled button in the interface. I'm not feeling really good about that. I'm also not really feeling good about being in quotes as a specialty. Content and accessibility should be core parts of design systems. Accessibility certainly, and content is very helpful to be that way. Imagine that throughout the rest of this presentation, every time I say content, I'm going to do it in air quotes. It's a little bit insulting. Some of the design systems work. I recently saw Diana Mounter present, and she presented this list. Her list was everything that you see there in black. And that's some of the content design systems work. And she leaves out all of the things that I show in amber farther down. Diana leads the design system for GitHub. and she speaks frequently about design systems. She's definitely an advocate, but again, content is not her focus.
And Michael, we're just real quick right before we keep on going, because we got a question that I want to make sure we clarify. The content that we're referring to here, when Michael says content, we're talking about the words, the text, and interfaces, so the language.
That is correct. I'm not necessarily talking about colors or visuals, which is to say imagery. I'm talking mostly about text. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, perfect. Let's keep going.
And actually, people have done studies and actually have removed all the necessary text from interfaces, and a lot of, unless your colors are exceptionally expressive, the remaining experience is not necessarily useful. But again, Diana also talks about some of the design systems technology, but because she's not considering how some of that is being built and delivered as far as content, she's not thinking about content authoring and management or something like taxonomy management. More system stuff to think about. She also lists these, when you're actually doing a design system, all of a sudden you have an internal product for the people creating your experiences. And so you have to manage that as an internal product and deal with prioritization, planning, hiring, onboarding, coaching, org design. But there's these other things that are really core to what content thinks about, change management, and tons of content stuff, content patterns, voice and tone training, testing, communication, localization, and this list actually overflows onto the next slide. These are all the sort of content contributions that we can be making into design systems. This is a deliberately ugly slide because this is sort of a happy laundry list of all the wonderful things that content people are interested in. Content strategists and designers do all of these in varying measures. And these are all things that can be of value in the design systems world. But if we're not there, some of this is not happening. We cannot expect a visual designer, an interaction designer, or the engineer who might be struggling to throw together some documentation to be doing all these things in a meticulous way. But how do we justify doing this in an organization? Yes, here is the return on investment slide. If your organization is interested in making things better or doing things faster, then we might want to make sure we have the right team on our design system. A content person is very vested in a better user experience for those internal stakeholders, and how that better user experience of the design system funnels through to the customer's experience. We're interested in better interaction and visual designer experience because better guidelines are good for them as well. To make the entire UX writer team happy, better collaboration with outside agencies. If our voice and tone guidelines are good, the outside agencies that we're using to do our marketing or landing pages or possibly search or social, that they're going to do a better job for us. And of course, better documentation for engineers, because without them, none of this sees the light of day. And of course, everyone wants to do things faster because everyone has too much to do and is working on weekends, and thanks to all our tools, we can work at all hours. But we can iterate more quickly and consistently and with better quality if we have a better system, and a better system that is aided by stronger content. So why should we do this? Again, to refine some of my thinking about the return on investment. Everyone is interested in quality. Everyone is interested in doing more. So everyone's interested in scale. And communication is key in a design system. By quality, I mean, we want to make sure our components and patterns, those things we use to, those fine elements that we use to build our experiences, are accurate, durable, robust, correct. And we also have to do some fact checking and maybe some acid testing. Occasionally, if someone's listing some pixel dimensions, maybe your content person can also join in making sure those numbers are adding up. But also, we need to make sure that the content person can scale their efforts throughout the organization. That's why I, as a content person, cannot be everywhere where I need to be. I cannot be everywhere where an error message needs to be written. And sometimes they're written at 1 a.m. by an engineer, but I can provide that engineer guidelines on how to do it so it won't be a complete disaster. And hopefully that engineer will reach out to me later to make sure he did a good job or she did a good job. Communication. Content people, a lot of us have our degrees in journalism, creative writing, creative arts, communication, marketing. We are communicators, we're storytellers at heart. We can actually help tell internally the story of what the design system is. We can help with release notes, news, recognition, adoption. And again, by making the design system better internally, the product that those teams are creating externally and what's reaching the customers will be better. So once again, let's go back to Nathan Curtis, and he's again talking about putting together a design systems team. He still has us in disabled looking gray, and there's content in air quotes, but obviously he's thinking it and he's questioning it. Do we need to grow the involvement of content in a design systems team? Obviously he loads heavily with front-end developers, but I think he's definitely open to the fact that yes, indeed, we do need to grow content to be involved in these systems. So one of the key refrains and themes that kept coming out of the Clarity Conference just about a month ago in San Francisco was about, why do you even do design systems? Why should I bother with this documentation? I'm so busy doing the other work I need to do anyway. Can I just write words and be done with it? But really, design systems are for people. They're for the people that you're working with, working beside, and for the customers that you're ultimately serving. Design systems actually help meet a number of needs. The Clarity Conference, by the way, is focused specifically on design systems. And there have been a handful of content folks attending, but we definitely need more content discussions at that conference, as at all design systems events. Some of the things that content designers need from design systems: we need recognition of content as a design and strategy practice, as part of building the product and experience. And that's why it's super valuable to get content in there in some way, whether it's represented as UX writing, content strategy, whatever. It's great to have a seat at the table and have it documented in the design system. And of course, there's the working things that content creators need: editorial style guidelines, voice and tone, content patterns, and how do I write those error messages? How do I write those blog posts? And real content in the patterns and components that go to build the experiences, not lorem ipsum, because real content is a way of seeing if those patterns and components are really durable and can really match all the use cases that those patterns and components may be put toward. And something that I've added recently to this slide is examples of good content. We need to, in our design systems, show, not tell, what is good content, what is a good use of this component and pattern. It's so much more revealing to say, that is good content. It's clever, it's on point. It achieves the business goals and it makes the customer move on to what they need to do. It's so much valuable to have a strong example than to tell you how to write it. Again, just for some refinement about content patterns and guidelines, we need to answer in a repeatable, reusable way how to write X, that type of content, that potentially annoying type of content. You have to keep writing over and over again: headers, headlines, accessible content, error messages, emails, blog posts, social guidelines, SEO. There's a lot of things that your organization may need to document as things you need to write over and over again. And I happen to know that at Adobe, as part of some of their design systems work, they actually came up with guidelines for do's and don'ts, which was and they noticed how meta it was. They have guidelines for how to write guidelines. But if that is helpful and your organization can benefit from it, definitely go ahead and do But perhaps even more significant than what content designers and strategists need from a design system is what everyone else needs. Every organization needs content. All of the people on this list need content, whether or not their organization has the structure to recognize that. We have a lot to offer all of these people, including our fellow content designers and strategists. And ultimately, if we're doing this well, our customers can benefit from the thoughtful, meticulous work we're doing on how to create better content and experiences. So let's talk about building better systems, and our systems, better experiences, better marketing, whatever our end product of our content and experience might be. We can actually work towards doing that. People depend on content every day in almost every system and experience, and we can definitely work through design systems on making it better. And we can definitely do that together. So I think I've gone really fast, and I probably have opened up lots of questions in your minds, and I'd love to hear what those are. But right now, I definitely want to thank you for listening. I pass it back to May and the team at Cordova if we want to start to have a discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. Love everything you said. Very excited to dive in to some of the topics. Before I forget, and for the Q&A, if you want to hear more of Michael, and who doesn't, or just scratching the surface here, there is a fantastic event that our own Ashley Kuhlman from Cordova will be at as well later next month in San Jose, so pretty local for those in California. And Michael is going to be diving in on the topics that he covered a little bit today. And then at the same time, just about, I will be a state away in Oregon talking about some of these topics as well. And I know we've got a lot of the content strategy community at both events later in October. Michael, thank you so much. And everyone on the phone, Q&A is open, so definitely take a moment to type in your question. We already got a bunch of questions in, and the one that I'd love to start with is we'll do that at the end. It's Q&A time. The question I'd love to start with, Michael, is lots of folks are asking. It's a question I want to know the answer to too, is ROI. And it's funny, you said, this is my obligatory ROI slide. And I chuckled because, you know, the ROI question, the content head as a grayed out specialty notation in some of these kind of academic works around design systems. I mean, it is insulting. Absolutely. And you know what I love about the visual design world is we've gotten beyond ROI. And of course, we're going to achieve ROI. We need a system to be able to do our work, to ship better products, to do it faster, to do it more efficiently. So walk us through the inside story of how you and Tina and your awesome leadership over at Intuit was able to have the ROI conversation with your team. I think that's going to answer a lot of the questions we're getting in around ROI.
I think that the big lever for us at Intuit, across Intuit, has been voice and tone. And that was really pioneered by TurboTax, by actually making it so that you're actually doing your tax and filling out that form was an enjoyable experience. And occasionally there'd be moments where you would actually find yourself smiling because the voice and tone was so friendly and approachable as opposed to the actual IRS forms. And that gave us an opportunity with QuickBooks and other products to realize we can actually build better, more human products if we master voice and tone. But to do that, we needed documentation of how to do that. And that was definitely definitely something that we built on a strong foundation for all of our content operations. It's interesting, voice may already be built into your organization as part of your brand team, but the content team across the end-to-end experience needs to try to embrace that and see how that works. And if you need metrics, which a lot of people do when they start to talk about ROI, you can always do testing. You can always start in whatever way that might form. But voice is a strong thing to build on. And then use of the product is also something that content can influence as well.
Awesome, thank you. We're also getting some questions around where this should sit in a large organization. You know, obviously you guys are multi-product, multi-line, multifunctional, and you're a public company. So maybe answer that question in two parts. In kind of large companies, who should own content strategy? Where should it sit for maximum effectiveness? And then at a smaller company, at a startup, if you were doing this from scratch, Michael, where would you have the team sit?
Sure. Let me talk about the small team because I've been very aware that there are definitely a lot of startups all over the place who are struggling with this, and all of a sudden they have a design system and the interaction designer realizes, oh, damn, or something stronger, I need to write documentation, and that's not what I was trained to do. So to that person, I say, reach out to somebody on your team. There must be someone around who might have an interest in helping you with documentation. If not, maybe it's time to start to grow your team. There might be some crazy writer in the marketing department with an interest in UX. Reach out and find some content allies in your organization, or go out and find them. In larger organizations, I see the question is two, May. It's like, where does the design system sit, and where does content strategy sit? Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
The design system is usually in design, but it bridges over into engineering because the engineering needs to know what to build and needs that good documentation. So it should sort of kind of straddle both. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you have at least content design represented under the design or within the design organization. Content strategy, depending on how it's being implemented in your organization, if it's more on the taxonomy, information architecture side, it may be in architecture or IT systems, depending on your organization. But there is always the need to bridge that back-end content strategy with that front-end content design. I'm in an interesting position at Intuit where I am right on the borderline between content design and content strategy. So I'm able to help bridge these worlds. And that's, that actually helps a lot in my design systems work.
Yeah. So much of what you said is really cross-functional, both at the startup phase and in large companies. Ideally, from a leadership perspective, we're getting a lot of questions around how do you make the case for content? Where do you want the leader to have kind of a seat at the table across which teams in order to make the most effective case for content?
It would be great if we had chief content officers, and there are some in the world. But a lot of them end up being working on social media or content marketing. Mm-hmm. It would be great if we had them that also had the UX focus. So we need to continue to raise the stature of content in the C-suite. And definitely, I had this conversation with some content teams that I will ask them, so you're in the UX organization, how many directors are there? And they'll say, 8, and I'll say, how many of them have a content background? And they'll say 0.
Wow. Yeah.
Or if we're lucky, 1. So we definitely need to be elevating content strategy, and it's tough because in a lot of design organizations, it's visual or interaction driven. We have to continue to talk the story about the value content brings.
Yeah, I love it. Got a question here around the evolution of your own guidelines. And I'm really curious on this too. what are some of the elements of your content style guide that evolve more than others? Do you guys have a formal review process? Who gets input into those guideline conversations, both what they are at the outset and then how they evolve as your products evolve, as your voice evolves?
This is a great question. I don't know if everyone is aware, but we did publicly publish our style guide as contentdesign.intuit.com, and you could actually have a look at it there. It is the result of a 2-year effort to reach across business units and silos and content creators all across Intuit to come up with guidelines that we all agree to. This is the way that we create content at Intuit, whether in TurboTax, ProConnect, or QuickBooks, and other products such as Mint. So it's been very collaborative. In developing this, we found that there were pockets of guidelines all over the company in Wiki, hidden away. Other people had their own separate design systems. So we started to just collaborate and talk to people and be as open as possible. Ultimately, it becomes unwieldy because it is as open as possible. So we create sort of a core, sort of a content council, a style council, you could call it, that actually makes some of the final decisions on this is the style guidance we want to put forward to.
Okay, definitely see that raising questions now too, which is great. So who is on your style council, and how representative of the company is it? How representative of content people is it?
I've gone out of my way to make sure there's someone from each business unit and each major product.
Wow.
It would also be, I think, to be perfectly honest, that it would be great if I had more participation from not just product focused people, but from more marketing, communications, and social people. And that's something on my list to do as well. They've been informed, but they haven't been as active, and that's because of time constraints.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot too, that product and UX definitely can lead this charge. But given that marketing tends to own the brand systems, shocking how few of them actually include content, especially when so many agencies are involved in content creation on the marketing side. At Intuit and in your experience, what are ways to involve marketing in the content design process and in the style guide creation process?
We're actually fortunate. We do have a director of content who has both marketing content designers and product-focused content designers working under her. So there's a lot of sharing of standards and approaches across teams. And we know that we need to be using one resource. It's true. Product can definitely lead this, and it is always a little bit of extra effort to involve marketing in these standards discussions. They operate differently. Their measure of success is different than ours, and they do more long-form storytelling, for instance, than the product. So they have different needs for standards and processes. Yeah,
but you guys have the same audiences, and so that definitely, from an audience perspective, is something that is shared. And to the extent that content is being developed across product and marketing for that same audience, those guidelines sitting somewhere jointly owned, I'd imagine would be incredibly helpful for content writers across both disciplines.
Absolutely. We have a big focus on making sure that the end-to-end customer experience doesn't show the seams of, oh, that was a marketing page and now I'm on the product page. So we're trying to be conscious that our style guide helps actually unify the entire experience.
Yeah, I love that. We've got some questions around folding in taxonomy and vocabulary management. And I know you guys under Jen have done a really incredible job. That's almost a separate effort. How have those two efforts interplayed, kind of vocab, taxonomy, and style content?
I am so lucky. I sit next to one of the smartest people I ever met, and she is a true content architect and taxonomist, and she's pushed me to rethink information architecture and language in ways that really every content designer should get the opportunity to experience. It's actually really helped with discussion of structuring our sites and with how we structure some of our components, and also how we structure some of our guidelines. What is the best way to explain how to craft this certain type of email, for instance? Actually having that sort of back-end knowledge always like sitting right next to me has been very influential in the development of our guidelines.
Cool. And so does that mean both are sitting at contentdesign.intuit.com?
We haven't actually surfaced taxonomy guidelines and principles on the site yet. It is actually something we're working on. Was this an internal call? It is actually something we're working on right now.
Cool.
Because we want to show that we are actually doing taxonomy in a very principled, forward-looking way.
Yeah, cool. We've got some questions around real-world examples, and what I'd love to do, Michael, is ask you publicly to come join us again, where we deep dive into some great examples of where content can be really strategic in a product. So I'm going to ask those folks who ask questions around real world examples to join us again, hopefully sometime in the fall, and we can deep dive into where content guidelines can really help us create brand experiences through product that are just out of this world for users. So hopefully, Michael, you agree with that.
Of course I agree with that. That would be so much fun. And I have a lot of examples that because of time constraints and because I wanted this Q&A to happen, I did not include. So yeah, this conversation can continue.
Cool, wonderful. Another line of questioning is around what are the non-negotiables? Where would you start when it comes to the content design system? So in terms of the metadata or CTAs or error messages, what are the elements of a content style guide that are non-negotiable, that are core, and where you would start?
I would push back and say, what do you mean by non-negotiable? We're not a policing agency. We put forward guidelines, suggestions for creating better experiences. There's always the possibility that you'll need to flex on these guidelines. We had a discussion just yesterday saying we would prefer you not to use the personal pronoun my in navigation. And just but if there's a use case for it, you should be able to do that. And you as the content professional can make that decision. Yeah. There are certain things that are non-negotiable on a very basic level, such as basic grammar and accuracy and correctness. But for the most part, we're not policing. That's not my job. We're just hopefully providing a tool that helps people do better work. Yeah,
wonderful. Another set of questions is around, I don't think we've ever gotten so many questions on a webinar, which is great. Another set of questions, Michael, is around working with the visual designers. So did you bring them into the first drafting of the content guidelines? I know that in some cases within Intuit, some of the content is starting within the design systems, and you've got content designers that are right there, but a lot of organizations have designers who are writing some of that first draft of the copy before it can get to the writing prose. So how did you guys bring your visual designers into the content style guide creation process, both in creating the guidelines and then adopting and evangelizing them?
Right. It's interesting because I came into the design system at QuickBooks, and the system was 5 years old already. Mm-hmm. So visual and interaction had already done it, and there was already a voice and tone system, which was terrific. What was lacking was documentation of how content played in those components and patterns. Mm-hmm. And that's where I stepped in, and visual had already done their thing. the components were beautiful, but now I had to say, okay, now what is the appropriate copy for that button? And so then those discussions started to happen. And then I had to basically start talking to everyone, including the visual partners, to say, does this make sense? What are reasonable, if we need them, character counts, that sort of thing. So it's all, you have to actually come at your partners at whatever stage that they're in.
Yeah, terrific. And within the writers, the writing community at Intuit, so folks who are content designers who are writing copy, folks across the rest of the product org who may be writing everything from documentation to emails for the product. How have you evangelized these guidelines to them? It's certainly available centrally and publicly, but did you do training sessions, or is there ongoing engagement of how to apply the guidelines? Tell us a little bit about rollout and then ongoing implementation.
Right. I have a huge distribution list of like everyone I know who's ever written anything at Intuit gets on it and cannot get off it. And I send them a relatively focused, not too long email from time to time saying, hey, this is going on. This is now part of the content system. You might want to be aware of this if this is the kind of thing you do. I've also reached out to teams that hadn't been reached out to or were not supported very well, such as our tech docs team, who produce tons of fantastic content all the time. And we actually had to create specific content guidelines for them. And they really appreciate that. And they ping me with questions now all the time, which is terrific. I love that idea of training. We need to do that as we onboard new content designers all the time. An idea that I will share with you that I haven't done yet is I'm going to launch a little, I guess you would call it a contest where you basically have to answer a few questions and maybe win a prize if you go out there, a scavenger hunt, and find this guideline in the style system. Find documentation for this. And that will force people to use it, to sneak in there, and maybe have a little fun as well.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Or the inverse, bug squashing. So find content that's live that does not meet our guidelines.
Oh, that hurts me. But yes, that's a great idea.
Written before your time, Michael.
That's great.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's really helpful. And just out of curiosity, is that list in the dozens? Is it in the hundreds? Just to give some of the audience a sense of the reach of the content evangelism that you're doing.
The people I reach out to directly with that, I think there's about 100 people on that list. Cool. And for an organization of about 9,000 to 10,000, that's not unusual, and that's not that many.
Absolutely. And they are your content evangelists on their own teams, right? And we talk a lot about this, kind of how content strategists can scale. You scale via an army of supporters and allies, and it feels like what you guys have done over there.
Yes, we definitely have people that we involve more than others in certain teams, and they're definitely allies, and they get it. And they share it with their teams, and they actually work it into their workflows, and they'll share it with designers and visual folks. Oh, we can't do that, or we should try this because here's the suggestion on the content system. Yeah,
cool. We've gotten some more questions around how to involve marketing, which makes me feel like we didn't delve deeply enough maybe into that. And we may be getting into more of your opinion, but people really want to know your opinion on kind of bringing marketing into the enforcement part of this process. What you can you, of what you can share, would love to hear around your involvement and kind of conversations with marketing, and what you would advise a content strategy team that's trying to get marketing to adopt their content guidelines.
It's interesting. This question comes up again and again. I've worked at a number of big companies, and there always seems to be a little bit of a division between product and marketing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's so marked that marketing will have its own style guide.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it can be injurious to the customer experience.
And that's not the case at Intuit, correct?
That is not the case at Intuit. We actually are using the same style guide. There is, in fact, if anything, we're using the same base style guide, and then the marketing partners and agencies get additional support. There's a handful of additional documentation that we choose not to make public.
Mm-hmm.
That is specific for agencies. And a lot of the agencies do get voice and tone training, because our voice and tone is very specific and very human.
I love that. And your agencies are getting trained on voice and tone by product line, and that's straddling product and marketing, right? It's not function specific.
It does. Everyone who writes content in the UX organization and in the marketing organization does get training on the voice and tone.
Okay, cool. Well, that is definitely going to be a separate webinar topic.
That is a hot one, and it's a challenge. And there's some other folks who are specializing in bridging that at Intuit that I could involve in the discussion.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, what a great Q&A. Lots more questions. Sorry for folks too who we didn't get a chance to answer your question specifically, but I think we did a really good job. You did a really good job, Michael, addressing kind of the major themes. I think it says a lot that, what content strategists at leading companies want to figure out really can kind of be grouped into three buckets, right? One is where should we sit for maximum effectiveness? And number two, how do we create the case from an ROI perspective? And that's, based on some of the questions for headcount, for resources. And then three, where do we start and how do we expand? So I think you did a really good job both in the talk and in the Q&A, helping us get to kind of all three buckets. Before we go, would love your help, Michael, in telling folks about Cordova, just a few minutes about us. We work with your team, and we're very privileged to be working with some of the best content thinkers across the enterprise. Your team is so close to the top of that list. And we love working with you guys. Why we exist, the problem we're solving is now that every brand is a publisher, it means so many of our colleagues and employees are writers. And whether they're contributing to a blog or writing error messages in your apps or writing emails to users, the content strategists we talk to are hurting lots and lots of writer cats in an organization. So Cordova is a content guideline system that allows managers to be really specific about terminology, tone of voice, writing style. And it's in our style guide product where a lot of the sophisticated content governance rules live. Michael, your team is quite customized, and I hope you agree the results are really awesome. In addition to style guide and terminology, Cordova is the inline suggestion to writers across the web that allows writers in the org to make sure content that's being created is aligned to the central company guidelines. And there's a range of sophistication when it comes to how these guidelines get integrated into processes. So Michael, your team has done an incredible job kind of getting the guidelines integrated and automated across content repositories for those 1 a.m. error messages that engineers are writing. And we've got folks who are bringing the Cordova suggestions via our API right into a custom content management system or off-the-shelf content management system, so writers can see the content suggestions right before stuff hits the delivery pipeline. And then there's, of course, our UI where folks can write or copy and paste content to make sure that it is in alignment with the central guidelines that folks are working hard to create, like yourself, and evangelize. So that's us in a nutshell. Would really love to be interacting with the content strategy community over the couple events that we're going to be at, one of them with Michael in October. We'd also love for folks to get into our self-service experience that we're launching later this year for early access. You can sign up at this link. And, you know, Cordova is one central experience. You know, folks like Intuit and Michael's teams get the Cordova experience kind of pretty tightly integrated into their back-end systems. Our self-service experience won't have those tight integrations, but we'll have a lot of everything else. And so that is what we're really excited to release for the content strategy community. So that sums it up. Michael, any last comments or instructions to or advice to the audience of content strategists with us today?
Just be collaborative, be kind, and do it.
Oh, I love that. Love it. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Michael, and excited to chat more and see you soon.
Thank you.